Hey there, it's Olivia Savannah here from Olivia's Catastrophe, and today I'm here to tell you about all of the books that I read in December. I had a good reading month, I read 15 books, and I'm here to talk about them. I'll leave content warnings in the description box down below if that's something you want, and without further ado, let's get right down to the books. When I filmed my entire TBR, my physically owned TBR, and asked you which books I should prioritise, the book that got voted for the most was Anne of Green Gables by L.M. Montgomery, and this was also one of the books that I wanted to read before the end of the year in my mid-year freakout tag, so I read it in December and it was absolutely wonderful. I really enjoyed reading this book. In this book we are following Anne, who is an orphan, and she gets adopted by the Cuthberts, which are this brother-sister duo, and they live in Avonlea at Green Gables, and it's just about them adopting Anne and basically what happens when they do. Anne is a character who has a lot of imagination, she's very creative, she's very honest, she speaks her mind, and she's not, I don't like to say it, not like other girls, but she doesn't have the prim and proper upbringing that the other girls in Avonlea have, so she's quite different, and it's about them just living their lives. This is one of those books where it's just vibes. Nothing too bad happens, it's all happy, it's all go-lucky. Sure, there are some misfortunes, but they're not end of the world ones, and it's just one of those really happy children's classics you can read when you want to be in a good mood, and that is exactly what this book did for me during the holidays. I love the TV series Anne with an E, so reading this was just absolutely delightful. It made my heart very happy. I immediately went and rewatched my favourite episode of the TV series after reading this. I do think that it has some religious vibes in it and a lot more morals to every single thing that happens than I expected, but overall this was just a happy, fine read. I definitely want to continue on with the series to feel that joy that this book gives me. And I have to say my favourite character by far is Matthew. He is adorable, he is so shy and quiet and peaceful. I really like him, but I also love Anne. She's just creative and imaginative and wonderful. I then did a lot of Christmas books. I wanted to make a Christmas vlog, but then I just wasn't in the mood. So instead, I'm just here to tell you about all of the Christmas books that I read in December. So one of the ones I finally read was The Afterlife of Holly Chase by Cynthia Hand. This is one that's been on my Kindle for a very long time, and in this one we follow Holly Chase, who dies, and then she goes to the afterlife. But the afterlife for her is working in this Christmas Carol-esque company which find a Scrooge every Christmas and try to do the whole Christmas Carol shebang so that that person can change their mind about Christmas, become a better person, and Holly's job is to be the ghost of Christmas past in that company. But when a certain Scrooge gets chosen and it brings back memories of Holly's own life, things get a bit more complicated than usual. This read was absolutely delightful. I'm so glad that I finally read it, and it was the perfect one to read in the lead up to Christmas. I really liked Holly as a character. She is unlikable. Can you believe it? I liked an unlikable character, but she is unlikable, and yet you can see how she grows and develops throughout the book while still remaining true to the core elements of her personality, which I really liked seeing. I thought the Christmas Carol retelling elements was so enjoyable. They were some of my favourite things about the book. I just like how it wasn't a direct retelling, but it still took elements of that story and wove them in quite well here. It was just so creative and unique, and that was just great to read. I do think that this book was predictable in the long run. I could see where the ending was going, but then again, as I often say with young adult, I just find it quite predictable these days. I am an adult reading it, so that makes a lot of sense. I don't fault the book for that. The ending was quite cheesy, but Christmas books should have cheesy endings. That is 100% what I believe. That is 100% what this book delivered. Was one annoying thing that the book did where it kind of skipped over time sometimes, and it would skip over time in a way where the character was pointing out that was skipping over time, and I don't know what it was about that, but it annoyed me a little bit. And oftentimes when you skip time in a book, it skips over something that I would have liked to see, so that was a bit unfortunate. But overall, I just had such a good time with this book. It was so fun, and I really recommend it as something to read at Christmas time. Stay Another Day by Juno Dawson, and this is another Christmassy young adult novel. In this one, we're following this family who haven't been together last Christmas, but this Christmas they are all coming together. There are 3 siblings and 2 parents, but there are also going to be some guests for Christmas, so an aunt is coming and a cousin and such, and some friends. And we're following the 3 siblings. Rowan, who is gay, he's also majorly dramatic, and he's not looking forward to going home. He just wants to party and be himself. Then we've got Fern, who is quite controlling. She loves her picture perfect Christmases. She's so excited to be going home and she wants everything to be perfect. And then last but not least, there is Willow, and Willow is dreading Christmas with her whole heart. And on the back here it says, with only 4 sleeps till Christmas, 3 secretive siblings, 2 hot house guests, and 1 juicy secret. This Christmas there will be some big surprises, and it delivered. This book was so dramatic and I was here for all of the drama. I loved it. Sometimes when books at the back say, there's a big secret, the secret turns out to be underwhelming. Not in this one. The secret was perfect. It added so much romantic tension and so much romantic drama, but also just sibling and family tension and drama. The family is going through a lot of things here. There's a lot that needs to be unpacked and talked about and has gone unsaid for ages, so it all explodes around Christmas time. I think lots of the characters are quite flawed. They present themselves as being certain ways at the beginning, but you find out different things about each of them in the ways they need to grow. I really thought it did a good job with all of the representation that I see here. I can't speak for myself. I've never had an eating disorder. I'm not gay, bi, or non-binary, so I can't speak for that representation, but it was nice to see it all in there, and I think it was handled well. I like the Christmas vibes. Even though there's so much tension and drama going down, it still hits the notes on the atmosphere of Christmas. It's set in Edinburgh as well, so it's just the perfect place to have a Christmas story set. Just really liked seeing all of the relationships in terms of the immediate family relationships, but also the extended ones in terms of the romantic relationships and what needed to be sorted through or couldn't be salvaged. And I also really liked how it wasn't predictable to me. I was thinking that certain people would end up in with certain people or end up doing certain things, and it just didn't quite pan out the way I expected with everything, so that was a pleasant surprise too. I have to say, Juno Dawson nails it with the writing style. I think each of the characters, each of the siblings have a point of view, but each point of view is just written in a way that felt so authentically them that it was a joy to read, and it made the characters come to life all the more. This is definitely one that I can see myself rereading during future Christmas periods. I gave this one 5 stars. I absolutely loved it, and I will be reading more by Juno Dawson for sure. I read a lot of Matt Haig because Matt Haig has a whole Christmas series. So I read A Boy Called Christmas, Father Christmas and Me, The Girl Who Saved Christmas, and A Mouse Called Miika. So those are all in the same series, and we're just going to go through them one by one. So the first one in the series is called A Boy Called Christmas. We follow a boy called Nicholas, and he lives with his dad in a very, very cold place, and they are quite poor. But when his dad gets tasked on an adventure to go and find elves and leaves him behind, events follow where he ends up needing to follow and trying to save his dad. And on the back here it says, this is the true story of how Father Christmas came to be. I really enjoyed this. It's a middle grade novel. It's got beautiful illustrations. Chris Mould does such a good job with the illustrations in this book, and I thought it was a very creative and fun and enjoyable Father Christmas origin story. I just liked how it wove in all of the mythology around Father Christmas. It did that very well. It had the adventure and journey bit, but it didn't last too long, so it never got boring. Things were always happening. Nicholas was just such a lovely character, and there's a theme of kindness that is woven into the story, and I loved seeing how the different ways in which kindness was always shining through. It was never pushed as a big moral, but it was discreetly and quietly there, and I love when that is done in middle grade books. So I just had such a good time reading this one, and then afterwards I went and watched the film adaptation with my sister, and that was also delightful and wonderful. Another Christmas film. and another Christmas book that I could see myself rereading and rewatching often. So if you like a good Christmas middle grade book, I do recommend this one. I then went on to read the second book, which is The Girl Who Saved Christmas by Haig, and this one was a bit disappointing in comparison to the other one, but it was still just a fine middle grade read. In this one we're following a girl called Amelia, and she has had a tough life and things have gone completely wrong with her, and she no longer believes in magic or in Father Christmas. And that means Father Christmas can't do his job because there are not enough people in believing in the Christmas spirit, and Amelia is one of the key people who truly believed. So Father Christmas goes to try and find her so that he can save Christmas with her. I think this is one where it's a middle grade, and I think children are just going to like it more than it being kind of applicable to all ages, so that is something I want to say about it. In this one there's quite a lot of events that happen a bit, I don't want to say randomly, but they feel very loosely connected to the actual plot, so they weren't necessary, but they were there for fun moments and to make children laugh, which is enjoyable for some, but not so much for me as an adult reading a middle grade. I like the characters. I do wish there was more connection between the first book and the second book, because we've met Father Christmas in the first book, but this Father Christmas felt like quite a different person, and I wanted to see that continuous characterization, and it just didn't last there. I feel like this could be read more as a standalone. It was cute, it was nice, I really liked the cat, I really liked meeting some fun characters, but it just didn't quite hit the mark for me. One thing I also want to say about A Boy Called Christmas was that when it came to the villain in A Boy Called Christmas, I really thought it was revolutionary how they dealt with the villain, and how it wasn't so much bad person, good person, but something a bit more in between, but not only in, oh look, we have a grey area character, but also, are we just going to put this character in prison, or are we going to try and develop them and help them to become a better person? And I thought that complexity was done very well in the first book, but in this book it was again back to the black and white, good and bad, and I didn't really like the fate that befell the villain in this one. Father Christmas and Me by Haig, which is the third one and kind of the final one in the trilogy. This one again was just fine, but it didn't really hit the mark for me. I felt like it wasn't that much about Christmas, and I was kind of in the mood to read Christmas books, so it was a bit of, you know, just not what I was looking for at the time. And in this one we follow Father Christmas and Amelia, and they are in Elfhelm, and they're just trying to live there and see what it's like. And this one had a lot of themes about not fitting in, what to do when you don't fit in, and how you can try and change your situations for the better, which is very nice to see. I think a lot of children are going to be able to relate to this, because some children do have a difficult time in school and feel like they can't fit in, like they don't assimilate in ways that other children are doing. So it's a very good message. It felt quite on the nose, but I am an adult reading a middle grade book, so just excuse that. And I did like how they brought in the Easter Bunny and bunnies, and I thought that was very creative and fun. I just think there's such creative books in the way that they're dealing with the mythology around these celebrations. So you could equally read this one at Easter as well as Christmas time, but it just missed the mark in terms of, it just wasn't as good as the first book. The first book was so good, and these sequels didn't quite follow up the way I wanted them to. Now it's called Miika by Haig. This is the latest one that came out this year, and it's also the most loosely connected. We meet Miika in the first book, but this one is kind of his story, and it's not too Christmassy, but it still has, you know, some snowy, cold, wintry vibes. And I almost didn't read this one because I already know that I'm not a person who does well with books that focus on animals or animal stories, especially when it's middle grade. So I was like, I'm not really feeling this, but I decided I would just read it, and I read it in a few hours, and I really had a good time, and it's the best one aside from A Boy Called Christmas, so that was a pleasant surprise. In this one we followed Miika, and he's heard about this Bunga Bunga cheese, which is very, very good cheese, so he wants to go and get it, and his friend wants him to help, because Miika might have some special powers, which puts him at an advantage. This book was so good. I thought Miika was a really, really nice character, and I really liked following him, and I thought this one had such a good message and showed so many good things in such a complex way, and yet it's perfect for children to read. I don't think I've read a middle grade which tackles bullying in a way where the bully is not clearly your enemy, but the bully is actually your friend, and they're just not a good friend, but you can't see past that. I haven't seen that dealt with in a middle grade book, to be fair. I need to read a lot more middle grade books, but I hadn't seen that happen before, and it was just so nice to see that, because even I've been in a friendship where it's actually not been the best friendship ever, and I didn't realize it. So books like this can be very helpful for children in learning that. But it also did a good job of talking about being true to yourself, about accepting yourself, and you can see how Miika's past has also informed the choices that he makes in present day. And it felt like I was dealing with concepts that even adult books don't touch on very well, but in a middle grade, but with animals, which were mice in snowy Elfhelm village. I don't know, it was fantastic, and I really recommend this one. Nice illustrations. In fact, all of these still had nice illustrations because Chris Mould does all the illustrations, and it was just a very good book. Continuing on with the Christmas theme, but only loosely, not really too Christmassy, I read The Truth Pixie and The Truth Pixie Goes to School. Both of these are by Haig, and I would say that these are early reader books, so there's lots and lots of pictures and not too much writing. It's all told in rhyme, and they are very good. I liked the first one the most, which is The Truth Pixie by Haig. I actually really loved this one. In this one we follow the Truth Pixie, and the Truth Pixie is cursed to always tell the truth, even if that truth is not a truth you want to hear. So that's why she does not have many friends. Not many people like hearing the stark and honest truth, and she's struggling with that quite a bit. This was so heartwarming. This was so heartwarming. I would compare this book to The Boy, the Mole, the Horse, the Fox, in whichever order it is, because in this one, the Truth Pixie is just telling raw and honest truths that people need to hear, even if it hurts them, but there are also sometimes some really heartwarming ones that just make you smile. I'm so impressed with how this book was told entirely in rhyme, and the rhyme did not feel forced at all. That is a skill and a talent. The illustrations are lovely, and it was just such a sweet story. I really enjoyed this. Truth Pixie Goes to School, which is not as good as the first one, but it's still pretty good, you know? So in this one, the Truth Pixie is going to school for the first time, which means she's telling truths to other school children, and she's also got a friend for the first time while she's at school, and it's about what happens when that friendship is tested. I do think in some points the rhyme here was a little bit forced, but to be honest, kudos to the author for still doing it all in rhyme. That's so impressive. The illustrations are still gorgeous. There are still some very nice truths told in this one, and it was just a good time. Not my favourite of the two, but it was still very good. I recommend all of those books, and I read a lot of Haig, didn't I? So now we're past the Christmas books that I've read, and I read a novel in verse called Solo by Kwame Alexander. This has been on my Kindle for ages, and in this one we follow the son of a rock star, and the rock star dad is a bit of a mess. He's an addict, he's an alcoholic, and he is just a messy parent to have. His mother has passed away, his sister is trying to be an artist as well, but is not doing too well, and he just feels overlooked and ignored and like he does not fit into the family. When he discovers a groundbreaking secret, he goes on a journey to try and find some answers. And I thought this novel in verse was fine. I didn't really love it. I was a bit disappointed, to be honest, because to be honest, I'm quite easy with novel in verse. If you give me a good one, I'll probably rate it 5 stars and love it, because I just love the format so much. But this one didn't quite work for me. I thought that the main character didn't do that much developing truly. If you look deep into his character, if you try to ignore the surface level things that they try to tell you are development, he hasn't developed. He hasn't changed. Things have happened to him, but they have not changed him. And I didn't like how the events are trying to pass off as character development when it truly wasn't. I think the side characters do more developing than the main character does, which is a bit disappointing, because even though the main character has a hard time in this book, I do think he's quite privileged and has it quite easy and is not able to see that. I like the settings, I like the different places that we went to. This one does take place partly in Africa. It was nice to go there. I do think the story was a bit stereotypical and surface level. I don't know, the whole thing felt quite surface level to me. I wanted to go deeper. I wanted to feel more. I wanted to feel more change happening and movement in the story, but it still felt quite static, and I was just a bit disappointed. But I don't think it's a bad book by any means. I think other people might enjoy it more. Then I read Pansies by Alexis Hall. This is the 4th book in the Spire series, which is my favourite new adult series. I'd never read this one before, because if I read this one it meant the series would be over. But good news, the series is being extended, so I finally read it. And it was a new favourite for me, as it's my favourite new adult series. I absolutely loved it as well, but this was such an emotionally exhausting read because I was absolutely addicted. I got no sleep for several days while I was reading this. I could not do anything but sleep, read, wake up, sleep, read, repeat. Honestly, I had no choice. I was a slave to this book, and it was quite exhausting being that addicted to a book for so long because this was quite a sizable book. But let me tell you what it's about. So we follow Alfie Bell, and he has come out quite late in life and discovered that he's gay quite late in life, and he goes back to the north of England, which is his home, and he accidentally comes out to everyone. And then he has a one-night stand with this boy who's acting very, very strangely. Well, this man, I should say, who's acting very, very strangely. And it turns out to be someone that he bullied at school for being gay. But it turns out that Alfie actually likes him, so it's about them trying to make it work. This book. So Alfie is an unlikable character, but like, it's not his fault. This one really deals with internalized homophobia, as you can kind of tell from the pairing and their history, but also internalized toxic masculinity. And Alfie as a character has so much internalized toxic masculinity and internalized homophobia to work through that it's emotionally taxing and grueling to see him go through it and make all of these mistakes time and time again. And even by the end of the book, you know, I felt like we were just getting started with how much development and time and work he had to do, because when you've got so much of that within you, it's really hard to get it out. It also deals a lot with outward homophobia. He's from the north of England, and there's not many people. It's like a very small town vibe, and not many people are understanding, including Alfie's own family. So there's tensions there, and it's unpacking some of those conversations that he has with his mom and his dad and his brother and how they treat him. And it was like, they didn't suddenly hate him or anything, but it was interesting to see that kind of in between where they don't accept it, but they're still accepting him as a family member. It was very taxing again to just watch all of that unfold. Fen is a delightful character. I loved how much he adored musicals and how much he loved plants and singing, and he was authentically himself, and it was so nice to see a character who truly knew themselves when we were next to Alfie Bell, who just was a mess of a man. But at the same time, Fen is grieving and working through those emotions, so he's having an angsty, heavy time, and then they're trying to make a romance work when they've got their history of bullying, which was quite traumatic for Fen, so they're trying to work through that too. It's just full of angst. All of these characters, there's so much they have to work through, and it's all going down in this novel, and it's so good, but it's so painful to read at the same time. I do have to say I struggled a bit initially because we are in the north of... This is the gift note, it keeps falling out. Because we are in the north of England and the accents were quite thick, and I struggled with that accent which is written into the text. It's not written into the text all the way through, but if you start and you're struggling with it, just know it does ease up later on. I will also say that the side characters of this one are entirely there just to be there for the main characters' development and benefit, and they're not very individualistic of themselves, but I didn't care. I had a good time reading this. I don't know if I can go through it again, but at some point I probably will, because let's be real, it's an Alexis Hall book and I always reread his books all of the time. The Transgender issue by Shon Faye. This is an argument for justice about transgender rights and issues, social issues, economic issues and political issues. I buddy read this one with my older sister, fellow middle sister, April, so thanks for buddy reading with me, April. And the transgender issue was just such a good, informative read. I think that what I liked most about it was how it really tackled the transgender issue, because most people, when they think about transgender issues, they might think about a certain author, they might think about toilets and who should go in which toilet, and it's talking about how those discussions that are very cisgender focused distract from the actual transgender issues, which have to do with poverty, which have to do with abuse, which have to do with mental health, which have to do with so much more than those smaller topics that we love to debate, rather than focusing on the real transgender issues. So it was nice to really learn more about the experience that trans people are going through, and also the ways in which we can make concrete actions to improve those living environments that transgender people are going through. I thought it was very, very well researched. These chapters are just so in-depth in terms of bringing up case studies, I don't want to say because they're people's lives, but case studies and examples of things that have happened in the past and are still happening. It also really talks about intersectionality and how beneficial it can be if the LGBT movement and the feminist movement and the Black Lives Matter movement were all united rather than these separate things. And it was talking about how we can all benefit from supporting the transgender community, but how we can all benefit from working together and unifying, and how we are actually focused on the same goals. This book does also have so many cases of atrocious events, horrible things that have happened to people that should not have happened, that don't deserve to have happened. So do be aware that that's going to be tackling some very heavy things that people have done that are completely unjustified and awful. It was moving, it was emotional, but it was also really informative and hopeful, and I really liked the way Shon Faye tackled these subjects and approached them. Read this book. Sticking with the non-fiction, I read I Survived by Victoria Cilliers, and this one is the story about how this woman married a man and then he tried to kill her. And this is her memoir. I heard about her story on the news, and then I decided to read her book. My mum has read it, my grandma has read it, and now I have read it. And I don't want to say this is not good, because this is someone's life, so yes, but I do think the writing in this one could have improved the reading experience. So I'll talk about the ways in which it could have improved first, and then I'll talk about everything else. So what I think this book didn't do so well was how it was written in hindsight, and it was written in reflection, because a lot of the things that happened to her had a lot of steps to them where she was hitting red flags and overlooking the red flags. And because of the way she writes it, she's like, oh, this is a red flag, and she points it out to you. And it makes her look like she's not very smart, when actually when you're in an abusive relationship, when you're going through those kind of things, you don't see those red flags. So I'd rather it was told in a way where the occurrences happen, but she doesn't point out when she missed the flags that she should have seen, because then we're more in position with her, we're more understanding how you can miss those key moments to lead up to where you get, rather than us thinking, oh, but that's such an obvious flag, why didn't you see that? And her being like, I should have seen that, because it does make her seem silly when that is definitely not the case when it comes to abusive relationships. So I think if it wasn't written with that hindsight view in it, it could have been a bit more of an enjoyable reading experience. And I do think it was written quite mechanically, especially the first 2/3 felt very mechanical. We go through her whole life before she meets the person who tries to kill her, and I felt like it was just listing off events so that we can understand some of her background and how she ends up in an abusive and toxic relationship, when really we're kind of there to see about that abusive and toxic relationship and seeing that setup, which is her life, but then told in such a mechanical way, kind of tick away from the storytelling a bit. It's just so hard to talk about because it is a memoir. But that said, what happened to her was absolutely awful, horrible. This woman is so strong for going through what she did and coming out the way that she did at the other side. And you see that power in the way that she's a mother, in the way that she loves her children, in the way that she goes through the case, in the way that she just approaches everything. I think this woman is very, very strong and has been through such a traumatic experience, and that doesn't even begin to cover it. I hope she's doing well. I hope she's living her best life now. I hope she's happy now, because she deserves some happiness in her life. But it was not only her story that really moved me, it was also the anger that I felt when seeing how the police dealt with her situation. There is so much failings that the police did here in terms of her being a single mother and having to raise these children while going through a case that is bringing up so much trauma and unraveling everything and exposing her, and how she didn't feel safe in so many moments. That anger towards the police and the horrible, horrifying feeling about what happened to her really just took this story away from me. So I do think this could have been written better and narrated better to make it a better memoir experience, but it was still a very powerful book to read. Carefree Black Girls by Zeba Blay, and this one was a good essay collection. It's essays about being black, the black experience, and just different things. I do think that the title kind of threw me a bit, because I did think this was going to be an essay about black joy, and I think some of the things that I've seen said about it made it seem really like hip and cool, and it's all focused on black joy when that's not really the case. It does end up in a place where it feels hopeful and it is looking at black joy, but before we get there we are talking about some quite dark and heavy topics, some personal ones about Zeba Blay's life, so if you're going into this book, do be prepared for the darkness and the difficult times that it is going to cover as well. But overall it's a very good and solid collection. What I really liked about it that I haven't seen before is how contemporary this one is, because it came out recently. So we've got essays here that are looking at Lizzo and perceptions of her and her weight, and then it's reflected on the author's own experience with her weight and her self-perception. And then we've also got essays on Cardi B and her actions and her choices, and whether she's too messy to be a celebrity, or what this beef with Cardi B and Nicki is really all about. And I really liked how it was taking such contemporary figures and contemporary topics and really unpacking them, unraveling them, drawing from the author's own personal experience, but also talking about the black experience on a larger level and scale. It was such an interesting read, and I really appreciated this essay collection. So I thought it's a good one and I do recommend it. Last but not least, I'm just going to talk about this massive picture book that I read called Robin Robin. It's written by Dan Ojari and Mikey Please and illustrated by Briony Smith, and this was such a delightful picture book. I just read it in a few minutes and flew through it. The illustrations are really nice and the storyline is quite sweet. I really like its message about accepting yourself. I like how it low-key fits in some Christmas vibes, but it's not too in your face and obvious, so it's just a nice one to read at any time, but especially at Christmas time. And immediately after reading this picture book I went and watched the 30-minute adaptation on Netflix, which was great. I really enjoyed it and because it's only 30 minutes long I watched it twice because I enjoyed it that much. So I definitely recommend reading this picture book and then going to watch the adaptation, and if you have children, definitely one to read and watch with them. It's fantastic. There you have it. Those are all of the books that I read in December. Please let me know in the comment section down below what was your favourite read of the last month of the year. Give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it, hit the subscribe button if you want to see more, and don't you forget to hit that notification bell to be updated every time I have a new video. And you know what they say, onwards and upwards. Excelsior!